Corruption is a very serious problem in the entire world. Civil society and citizens throughout the Western Hemisphere, all the way from Alaska to Chile, have been mobilizing on the streets against corruption. Corruption is so serious that at the Summit of the Americas in April of this year in Peru, all the heads of governments, all the heads of states will be discussing democratic governance against corruption. Stay tuned. Carib Nation is up next.
Exercise and eating healthy, that's the best thing for your body.
The day you stop smoking, you start to reduce your risks. Support smoke-free public spaces. Love your body. Celebrate Caribbean Wellness Day. Make every day a wellness day.
Gotta take good care of yourself, nothing's better, and every single day should be Caribbean Wellness Day. Join the wellness revolution, live a healthy lifestyle.
Brought to you by Caribbean Wellness Day.
Corruption is an all-encompassing issue. It is historical, it's economic, it's social, it's political, it is cultural. It's virtually all-pervasive throughout the world. But in the Americas, the leadership of the Americas, and particularly the Organization of American States, has decided that they would look at the subject at the Summit of the Americas in April on good governance against corruption. Today in our studio, Carib Nation is very fortunate to have Ambassador Nestor Mendez, the Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States, to have a conversation with us about the Summit of the Americas and what they are expecting in that summit with regard to dealing with corruption effectively. Ambassador, welcome to Carib Nation.
Thank you so very much for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you on our program over the years. And I'm so excited. I did not get an opportunity to congratulate you. I know it's about a year or so now that you have been elected Assistant Secretary General.
Well, you know, time really flies, Professor. It's good to see you again. Actually, it's now 3 years.
3 years?
Since I have been on the post, since I left the Embassy of Belize in Washington. But it's been great working with the peoples of the Americas, for the peoples of the Americas, covering the breadth of issues dealt with by the Organization of American States.
I'm very happy about that.
Quite challenging.
Very, very happy. And I'm happy that you are happy that over these 3 years you've been doing a lot of work. But Ambassador, I know that people know about the United Nations. They know they have demonstrated against the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. But a lot of people don't know about the OAS. Can you just tell us what is the Organization of American States?
Well, the Organization of American States is the oldest multilateral institution in the world. Yes, 70 years serving the peoples of the Americas. Our membership comprises all the countries in the Americas, from Canada all the way to Argentina, going through Central America and all the Caribbean countries, 35 members in all. At the moment, we have 34 active members. Cuba is not an active member. The breadth of our work has evolved over time. 70 years is a long time for any organization. And at the moment, our work is focused on 4 main pillars. We have promotion of democracy, defense of human rights, integral development, and multidimensional security. Under those 4 areas, as you can imagine, we have accumulated a number of mandates that span basically most of the facets of life in the Americas. It would take a long time to go into everything we're doing on a day-to-day.
But it's good enough to know the pillars, which is very important. Now, many people believe the OAS is very similar in its structure in more ways than one. We've had students that participate in the model OAS up to recently. We've been there over 10 years doing it. And they say you're like the United Nations of the hemisphere. What is the fundamental difference between OAS and UN?
Well, we have to look at the history. The United Nations was formed at a given point in world history, and it was meant to be a place where the world met. The Organization of American States is older than the United Nations, and it was in an effort to bring to life the dreams of integration, of democracy, of sovereignty, of peace building, all of those principles which the founding member states deemed absolutely essential for the growth of our countries and for peaceful coexistence.
And you're based here in Washington,
The
DC.
headquarters is based here in Washington, D.C. We also have a network of offices that represent our organization in,
All across?
in 28 of the 34 active member states.
So you have like a representative in every
Yes,
country.
we call it the OAS National
and
Office.
you continue working in those countries at the national level with the 4 pillars.
That is correct.
Okay.
Those offices represent us.
That's
they
very
manage our
interesting.
projects, they
That's very
interface with the
interesting.
governments,
That's very
liaise with civil society. So those are our windows in each and every country.
Can you identify at least one important achievement of the OAS in these 70 years?
Now that is very
Just
difficult.
one, just
That's
one.
very difficult, Professor.
Why, you
because
too much?
we have done so much,
right.
so much in the Americas. But if you want to focus on one big thing,
Yes.
there are no wars in the Americas.
There.
There have been no wars in the Americas.
Peace. It's
For a
been
long
a zone
time.
of peace.
It has been a peaceful
I mean,
region.
since we left the civil wars of Central America.
That is correct. You asked
And the
about the
brutal
last
dictatorships
decade.
of
Yes. So we have had peace in the Americas for a long time. We now have democratic governments in most of the countries in the Americas,
Elected in verifiable, free and fair election.
with challenges in different.
And OAS contributed to that?
Absolutely. The principles that underpin our organization include the promotion of democracy, building democracy, constructing democratic societies, governments that are transparent and adhere to these democratic principles.
You train the government officials in that?
Well, we don't train them specifically in democratic principles.
Yeah.
What we do is we strengthen the institutions to implement the democratic
To
principles.
ensure there's verifiable, free and fair.
Back some time ago, many years ago, we did have specific programs to train people in the practice of democracy.
Okay.
Remember, the history of the region came through a very difficult, very dark period
Yes.
of repressive governments
Dictatorships.
that were not democratic
Yeah.
at all.
70s,
So,
80s.
but the fact that the OAS has been around so long and remains an important, successful organization would also reflect the fact that we have been responding to the needs of the member states along the way and adapting to the needs as they evolve.
Yeah, so you have election observers in most of these elections spread across the hemisphere
is-
to verify whether the elections are free and fair. Is that correct?
That is one of the areas
But it's
in which
important.
we help to strengthen democracy. We deploy election observation missions upon invitation. We can
Okay.
only do it
Yeah.
when we're invited.
Okay.
We follow the certain international standards
Yes.
for election observation. The one thing that is important, we don't deploy missions to legitimize an election.
Governments or an election.
You know, what we do is we observe the process
And report.
and we make sure there's a certain checklist that we follow.
Yeah.
And then we prepare a report which contains important recommendations on how, if there were any inherent weaknesses, little hiccups in the system, how those could be corrected
Could be remedied
in the
yes,
future.
Yes, that's very good. Ambassador, corruption is a serious issue across the world. But in recent times, we have a lot of problems in many countries. And right now in Brazil, the former president is facing a jail sentence. And as we go across the Americas, not only in Latin America and the Caribbean, but also in the United States, even here in D.C., at the level of local government, we have a couple of councilmen in jail. So why and who choose this theme of democratic governance against corruption? How did you all come about this?
As you rightly say, if you look at the situation in the countries of the Americas at this moment, corruption and the battle against corruption is on everybody's mind, is on the news all the time. It is an issue that the organization has been grappling with and battling for many, many years now. The fact that at this moment it came up as the theme of the Summit of the Americas reflects that there is a sentiment, there is a sense that it is at that moment where it has to be looked at that level. Now, who chooses the theme for any Summit of the Americas? The way the process has evolved, this is the 8th summit. We have had 8 before this one in Lima, Peru. The way the process is structured is that the host country, the government that invites everybody, has the first opportunity to suggest, to identify something that they think is reflective of an issue that needs the attention at the highest level in the Americas. And the government of Peru picked this one, and then they basically presented it to the member states.
Well, the truth is Peru has had a record of dealing with corruption. There's no doubt about that in previous governments and so forth.
Well, a lot of our countries, have had challenges.
Yeah. So what kind of the governments are the ones that decided on this theme, because OAS is a fundamentally intergovernmental organization. What kind of expectations do they have at this summit about the outcomes? Is there one single outcome you sort of hoping that you all will achieve? What is it?
Maybe it would help to talk a little about the context, what a summit entails, what all goes into it, and in preparing for it and around it. So first of all, we have an agreement where a summit will occur every 3 years. It will be hosted by one of the member states of the OAS. In preparing for that summit, a theme is selected. But in preparation for the actual summit as well, we hold wide-ranging consultations with civil society, for instance. This goes back months before
Did civil society contribute to deciding on the theme?
They have been consulted for many months before the summit takes place. We had a process of virtual consultations. We had a process where, for instance, civil society representatives in individual member states were invited to come to the OAS national office.
I'm aware of that in Guyana. I know someone who...
And they actually participate in consultations with headquarters, with other civil society representatives connected to the network offered by the OAS.
But the summit itself, what kind of expectation is there for an outcome that will say to the people, okay, all the presidents have met in Peru, and they've been to a conference, they spoke about corruption and all that, but what would be an outcome,
I think what you are inferring by that is that there is an expectation of a political commitment, a political document.
Some kind of commitment.
So the member states have been negotiating a document, the Lima document, yes, and that document has been under negotiation for many months now. It's arduous, it's difficult, it is on the theme.
I would imagine.
The process of negotiation can be quite taxing and lengthy. At this moment, I would not want to talk about the specific components of that political declaration because it's still being negotiated.
I understand. I know
but if you look at the theme, clearly the expectation is that given the visibility, the extent of the concern about government
That in
and
itself
people,
is a good outcome.
that corruption is a matter that has to be dealt with at the highest
At the
level,
highest level.
then the expectation is that certain agreements, certain commitments will be made that will put our countries in a better position to fight corruption.
Yeah.
And it cannot be only putting in place government mechanisms to improve those weak areas. We have to take a long-term view, because corruption doesn't happen overnight.
Well, it's been with us since the beginning of times.
Don't, somebody wakes up one morning and decide, I'm going to do this and that.
I teach government and political corruption,
So,
and we deal with it. Is
yeah.
it the nature of man?
So
Were
there
we born
are
corrupt, or was it social? Is it political?
There are certain weaknesses in our systems of government and in our systems of rendition of services to our citizens. And there are certain weaknesses in the training that we give to people, to the people who serve the citizens of the Americas, the government people I'm talking about. There are certain weaknesses that need to be addressed, and they have to be looked at in a holistic manner.
Well,
so what is the expectation? The expectation is that there will be certain agreements that will start to address these weaknesses, both in the immediate, in the medium, and in the long term.
Well, I know that you have said to me previously in our conversations that OAS already has developed some tools to deal with corruption, some mechanisms and so forth. Can you identify one or two?
Sure. From the mid-90s, we have the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. The Inter-American Convention Against Corruption also has a mechanism for follow-up, the follow-up mechanism for the implementation of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. All our countries agreed on this convention. And we have this mechanism where it provides for a peer review of member states by member states. So every member state that is part of the follow-up mechanism gets an opportunity to be reviewed by 3 peers. And then there is a certain checklist, certain standards that are looked for. At the conclusion of that examination, a report is prepared, it's discussed with the member state, and then it's made public. That is one of the things that we have, and it has been working for many years now. But we are working in other fields as well. We have, for instance, the mechanism for inter-American cooperation on public administration, on public management,
very important, public administration,
which is looking at the whole issue of governance, transparency in governance. What can we do to help those countries that have said, we have a problem in governance. We need help from you to strengthen these institutions. What are the specific tools that are available today in terms of technology, in terms of best practices?
That's very important.
That can be brought by the institution to the assistance of the countries who say, we need help in these areas. Let me give you an example of a very specific area. Government procurement.
That is a very serious issue.
In the area
world.
of government procurement, we have the Inter-American Network on Government Procurement. It has been it has been working for about 13 years now, and it has been very effective, quietly but effectively. Larry, Professor, you were telling me that a lot of people don't know much about the OAS, and I am the first to admit that we have been working successfully, but too quietly maybe. And we have not yet been in a place where we can show the peoples of the Americas how we touch millions of lives every day in a very concrete way. So the Inter-American Network on Government Procurement has been working for about 13 years. They have been strengthening the mechanisms in place by governments to bring transparency, to bring certain standards to the whole process of government procurement.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that, because some people think that procurement and these problems is like the mother of corruption. I swear, contracts for this, contract for that. We just had the big problem from the company in Brazil that they claim corrupted about 22 countries in the world with these whole thing, the bidding system, the contract system, and so forth.
the truth is that in many of our countries, in many countries in the Americas, throughout the world, in fact, government expenditure, government purchases, government procurement has a significant footprint on the economy of the nation, especially in the smaller countries. So clearly, there have to be certain standards, certain mechanisms in place to make sure that this expenditure responds to certain expectations. And, you know, I think that some countries are more advanced in others in putting in place these mechanisms. And we have very good examples in the Americas. We're moving heavily towards automation, you know.
Yeah.
Moving e-governance, but automation of essential government services to the people in the area of government procurement. There are some countries that are very advanced in the entire process is very transparent, and there are certain concepts that are managed under the rubric of government procurement. For instance, in the past, when people were making decisions on government purchases, they would say, you know, who's giving me the best price, and we go with the best price. That is not the essential criteria now. Now they're looking about value for money
and quality.
So
we don't want bridges that fall down, and we need
the whole
bridges
thing
that last.
The quality goes into the bigger concept of the value for the money. You know, responding to the need. Are you getting what you really need? The quality that you need. So value for money. But in that context of value for money, there are other considerations now that were not there before that go beyond just the price. For instance, if the government opens a tender process for services in whatever area, they would look at the companies that have submitted a tender, that have bid for it.
And diligence.
And then due diligence is one, you know, is the company able to deliver? But also, does this company doing enough within the framework of whatever laws are in place to protect the environment?
That's very
Does this company, for instance, have a record of labor law violations?
Very
is it violating the rights of its laborers? So in the value for money concept, many more elements than just the price go into effect now. And these things, the network that I'm talking about is very complex, but it's very effective. It's a network of senior technocrats who know each other, who get on the phone, who get advice, who share information, and people don't know about it.
Well, thank you for that information, but I'd like to shift a bit now. Like every summit, like every conference, international conference, there's always controversial issues. And Carib Nation has been following with great interest that quite perhaps the issue of Venezuela and Honduras might be quite controversial at that summit.
Well, you know, Professor, you have been reading the media like I have been, and certainly there are certain issues that have been very, very prominent in the media. In the preparations, in the running up to this summit, there is a lot of attention being given to the entire process and the big political issues that are drawing attention in the hemisphere. Now, the theme of the summit is against corruption, democratic governance against corruption. So these big issues that you mentioned, Venezuela and Honduras, are not on the agenda.
Oh, it's not on the agenda?
No, they're not on the agenda.
But I guess on the corridors there'll be a lot of discussions.
I have heard, you have heard, people who watch the news have heard that there has been at least one president, maybe more that I haven't seen, have specifically said that the issue of Venezuela, they will be putting it on the agenda for discussion.
I heard that.
But you know, those are part of the dynamics of a meeting of this level. The expectation for every summit of the Americas is that we will have as many leaders attend as possible.
I know.
That has been the tradition.
Yeah. Now, one other matter, in all these conferences, we go to the UN and so on and so forth. And I have represented labor, the UN, for about 8 years, and I followed all the UN conferences, financing for development. So we make all these beautiful resolutions, but we don't have the money to implement them. And I know the OAS is going through a struggle with finances. will this conference be a bit different in identifying financial resources to implement whatever resolutions are going to be made about good governance against corruption?
You see, maybe this is a good moment to dissect this a little. Now, yes, the OAS, like every other multilateral institution in the world, is going through some financial challenges. That is absolutely a fact. It's public. It's no secret. So, but in terms of implementing the commitments that are embodied in the Declaration of Lima or the document of Lima or the commitment of Lima, whatever it is that the final document eventually is called, the commitments, the implementation of those commitments will fall on the governments, because remember, it's the governments that are making these commitments. The OAS is the body that will help governments implement these commitments in whatever place it's called on to do that. Okay. So, what will those commitments be? We don't know yet.
Okay. So
it could be, for instance, that they will agree to tighten certain laws in their countries, you know, streamline certain processes.
It may not require money.
Go further into automation of certain processes. It may be looking at the education system and seeing where we can rethink the values that go into educating people so that the whole cultural element that goes into the breeding grounds for corruption are thwarted or at least, you know, controlled from the very beginning. We don't know. So not all of those commitments will require a monetary outlay to be implemented.
Yeah, the political will and
exactly.
And that all. Well, Ambassador, I'd like to thank you very much for spending your time with us. I know you're very busy preparing for this summit. So Carib Nation is very happy to be dealing with this question of corruption. Now, we are hoping that at the Summit of the Americas, that the leadership will really address this issue very, very seriously, because indeed, corruption is subverting and undermining good governance in all the countries of the Americas and also around the world. But you know, very often, as I said, they make resolutions at these conferences, and even though, as our ambassador pointed out, financial resources are not necessarily needed to implement a lot of policies, because in the countries themselves, those resources might be there. However, we also would still need a lot of resources to implement. And we need the political will, because as I often say, vision without implementation is hallucination. Until next time, I'm Paul Nehru Tennessee for Carib Nation.